Tolkien was a devout Christian, and without his worldview, you don't have the same success for Lord of the Rings, since his worldview is a defining part of Middle-earth. And I even say more so than things like mythology or even his life experiences. I would say his worldview attributes more to his success. So I'm going to be talking about 4 different aspects of his worldview that I believe without any of them, you don't have the Lord of the Rings story. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the White City Podcast. I'm Philip Dutt, your host, and I don't have anybody else with me this time, actually. So I'll be, as I was mentioning in the intro, I'll be talking about 4 different pillars of Tolkien's worldview, which are a sovereign hand, universal morality, good versus evil, and inner temptation. And, these things are subtle. I don't think either any of these things Tolkien's saying is he's trying really hard to push the idea of, hey, there's like this divine creator who started everything in Middle Earth, right? And just focusing solely on like faith related aspects. Because so it's in his letter to Robert Murray that Tolkien actually talks about how, well, he responds basically to Murray's comments on grace, and then also Mary, Mary being the mother of Jesus, right? As being also resembling Galadriel. So, and I think the famous quote that Tolkien gives on this is, the perception of beauty, both in majesty and simplicity, is founded. The Lord of the Rings is, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. That is why I have not put in or have cut out practically all references to anything like religion, cults, or practices in the imaginary world. For the religious element is absorbed into the story and the symbolism. So, yeah, I mean, of course, there's a lot more to the letter he sent to Murray on that, but I think that it's just the line that he's talking about, how like he didn't add anything or remove anything that had to do with like having a Christian faith in the works. So yeah, so the things, and also there's a book called The Christian World of the Hobbit by Devin Brown. I think it's pretty legit. It's not just him trying to pull out things that confirm what he's saying about the Middle Earth and all. I think even Tom Shippey has a recommendation in here on it, saying it's accurate and all. So I think it's pretty cool. So Christian World of the Hobbit, check it out. But so basically to start off with a talk just briefly about all these things, and then I'm just gonna tie these things into my podcast at different points, especially for like comparing the books to any movie or Rings of Power even. So so for Providence, I think the thing to see here is that, and one of my co-hosts even talked about it a lot in different episodes, is how there's a lot of times in Middle Earth story where there happens to be just an instance of luck for the good guys, right? And while the evil side always seems to have these plans and they carry them out real well, and they're very organized about it, I guess, in a sense. So, things like for luck, that you could have with like Bilbo finding the ring, or like Gollum just happened to trip over a rock and fall into Mount Doom. Like nobody's going to actually go into Mount Doom and destroy the ring of their own will, right? the rings is going to have too strong of a pull. So there are different things like that throughout different aspects of the story, where you have a lot of instances of there just being luck, like, oh, this just happened at this right time, especially where Devin Brown's talking about, like, Elrond just happens to, you know, see, like, was able to see the words on the map, the runes at the, in the moonlight at like a certain, just the right time, right? So I think that's the same kind of thing too with the Door of Durin and Durin's Day at the Lonely Mountain as well. So I think those are just like things that it's subtle, right? And I think the rest of these points are also subtle as well. Tolkien's not trying to throw things in your face about it. So I guess a point that Brown mentions that I'm not making as one of the pillars is that there's a purpose for inconsequential characters, right? There's a purpose for everybody. There's a purpose for Bilbo, even though he doesn't want to go on this journey really in the beginning, but still, like, Gandalf knows what the purpose for Bilbo is in some way, right? And the same thing, like, this is Iluvatar, right? The Sovereign Hand is Iluvatar working through this. And I think it's interesting too, or like at Moria, where they're all convinced to turn to Moria whenever Karajas happens. I was talking about this in my previous episode with Matt, and basically how that is even an instance of a divine hand, because there was a storm that happened in like this avalanche and all, which forced them to go to Moria, and that's where Gollum was, and that's that's where Gandalf fell. So, all right, and so universal morality. I think, in this one is that there's always a right or wrong decision, and I think one instance is where Aragorn has to decide to help Frodo and Sam, or he has to decide to go on his own. And he basically decides that Frodo's out of his hands and there's nothing that he can really do to help Frodo anymore, essentially. I think that there's similarity with whenever Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli come across Éomer, and Éomer's like, well, why should I trust you? Or, why should I essentially, like, think you guys are on my side? And I think, like, basically Aragorn's like, well, there are people who, no, there's a right and wrong decisions always to be made, but it's part of, like, trying to make sure that you make the right decision. It's not just that there is no right or wrong answer. I don't know. So he was trying to convince Éomer to do that. Universal morality. Oh yeah, so good versus evil. I think that this has to do also with even universal morality too, I guess, has to do with black and white characters in Middle Earth. And I think the importance, though, is to see is that there is a character that is completely good, and that is Iluvatar, right? And then there's a character who is completely bad, right? And that would be like Sauron or Morgoth, right? And like Sauron's only at times like try to trick people about the fact that he's repented and he's changed his life around and all that stuff, but he's never actually committed to doing that. It's all lies. So, so there's definitely a good and evil side, and of course there are individuals who are in the middle who, might seem more gray, might have more of these, harder times to make decisions about the right or wrong thing to do. And then the last one with just like internal and external temptation. And I think that just points to the fact that people are corrupt. And he's in Tolkien's writing that his characters in his story like are corrupt for the most part, and that's where it starts. I mean, like you have Iluvatar, who's always been good in a sense. Like the music of the Einar and all, and how he created things, or he created them for his good. But people tweak those things and use them for their own purposes. So at the end of the day, they were still like they made evil out of them, I guess, and so people have this internal temptation of doing the right or the wrong thing, right? So I think that Gollum's a great example of that. And I mean, even with like Bilbo deciding to give the Arkenstone to Thranduil and Bard, that's another instance of him trying to figure out what to do as the right thing. And I guess maybe that is more of a moral thing, but still, I guess maybe it's hard to exactly split those hairs all the time. But yeah, I guess that's still the sense of it's like it's not just the idea of there are these situations that um, that just make it so that there's a desire to do the wrong thing, but the desire to do the wrong thing is inside of you, not just somebody trying to get you to do the wrong thing as well. I guess that's more or less it. So thanks for listening to the episode, and if you've got any ideas about things that you think are, I guess, more ideas on Tolkien's worldview in Lord of the Rings or Middle Earth in general, just let me know in the comments. And if you think that there are other things, I guess, in a sense, more important or more critical to that worldview than what I've shared, go ahead in the comments. And if you think that these things are great factors in making Lord of the Rings great, do you think that those factors also stand up in our world as well? So catch us for our next episode coming out next week. Thanks for tuning in.